Good morning.
Why, hello.
Hello, good morning.
Hello. We've got with us today Books at Lunchtime at Kett's Books. We've got Matson Taylor with us.
Hello
I've got one too.
I've got mine. I've got two. Yeah. Here we go.
Oh, fantastic.
Everyone.
So I've got an edition which is available now, and Em has an edition which is going to be available very soon of the Miseducation of Evie Epworth. And we actually have a special independent bookshop edition on its way to us, which we don't have now because it's that special. But we've got the author today. How exciting. So Matson, welcome.
Thank you very much. The independent bookshop edition is so special. I don't have a copy yet. I'm desperate to see it because it's my favorite. It's bright yellow. It looks absolutely lovely. So
really?
I'm desperate to get hold of a copy.
Oh, wow. Well, if anyone's watching this in the future, they will probably be collector's items by then. But at the moment, they're available on pre-order. So first come, first serve. This is a really good, fun book, actually. And I think that my copy has already been held by your hands. Did you bring us a copy of this and say hello last year?
I did, yeah. I was doing, it was that brief gap between lockdowns and the book came out. So I was very lucky and I did manage to get out and visit quite a few bookshops. And I was coming to Norwich and Norfolk and various other places, and I knew Wyndham, and I thought I'm going to just pop in because I'd seen Kett's book, so I thought I'll come and say hello and go and have a coffee in Wyndham, and I did. I came and said hello and dropped a book off.
Yeah, well, I'm very sorry I missed you, but the volunteers that you talked to at the time were ever so pleased, and I have read it and did really enjoy it. And you say Wyndham as if you could even spell it.
I know. Well, I did spend a few weeks saying Wymondham, but I used to work in Wyndham.
Really?
I taught there. I taught evening classes to adults who were learning computer skills. And I'm not very much of a computer whiz myself. I was quite worried about this, but my very first class, I was quite relieved because the first class mainly revolved around how to switch the computer on. So I thought I can cope with this. This is my level of computing. But I taught them how to switch the computer on, and they taught me how to say Wyndham.
Fair exchange, life skills. Tell us about your book.
Well, it's a book. It's a book really sort of revolving around sort of coming of age, and it's the coming of age of two things. It's the coming of age of Evie Epworth, and she's that funny age, 16 and a half, and I can very clearly remember being that age myself. And sometimes you feel like you're quite adult and knowing and very clever and know everything, and then other times you do sort of go back to feeling a child again and quite naive and innocent. And I really like that idea of these two different aspects of a person's personality and growing from being a child to being an adult. So the book is about that, Evie growing up, but it's also about the decade growing up. It's about the 1960s. It's set in 1962. And again, I really wanted to choose that year very carefully, 1962. My other job is I'm a historian. So I talk about decades a lot, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and we use decades as shorthand. And I think everybody thinks, if I say the 80s, everybody could kind of imagine big perms and shoulder pads. And of course, that didn't happen on the 1st of January, 1980. It takes time for a decade to grow up, to find itself. And I wanted to write a book where the 60s arrived in sort of all its pop glory in this small village in Yorkshire. So at the beginning of the book, there are faint whiffs of the 60s, just drafting in occasionally, but it mainly still feels quite like a 1950s period book. But then by the end of the book, hopefully there's like huge blasts of the whiff of the 60s, the smell of the 60s comes along, I hope.
Yes, there's the unnamed 4 boys from Liverpool.
Exactly, yeah. So and that's it. The 60s start, don't they, at that point, I think. Yeah.
It's quite good when a couple of times people hear Love Me Do for the first time. What's that? That's unusual. It's a nice moment to capture.
Yeah, because it must be really, it must have been, I mean, it's so recent, isn't it, I suppose, 1962, and that first Beatles song. And for people like us who've just grown up with the Beatles, and, none of us were around in 1962, but you know, I think it's very easy to forget how revolutionary that must have sounded. You know, and so I was trying to capture that, and that, oh my God, what's this amazing new stuff? Yeah.
So that's kind of the setting and the soundtrack, but you've got a bit of an evil stepmother story going on as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I wanted to write a funny book which was about sad things. And one of the writers who I really like is Kate Atkinson. I think she does that very well, and I kind of really wanted to try and do that. So it's a book that's about quite serious issues. You know, there's like grief, there's guilt, there's the themes of sort of women in society in the 1960s. And to do that, I needed a baddie. I decided I needed a baddie, and yeah, the stepmom is the baddie. But she sort of enables me to deal with some of these far more serious issues. But actually, having said that, I don't want to make it sound too serious, because out of everybody, she was probably the most fun to write. You know, like there's nothing better than writing a good baddie and in a funny way. I think I had a lot of fun doing that.
She sets herself up for ridicule, doesn't she? I thought there was a page, because Evie's quite bright and she reads a lot, and she likes to play with language, and she describes the other characters. And I just thought this half a page passage captured the whole thing, the characters, her love of language, her imagination, her diversions. And we don't normally ask authors to read, but I think the paragraph on page 76, and I haven't asked you ahead if you do this, starting with when Mrs. Scott Pym says, "I can read you like a book," and then Evie's response, I thought it captures the whole book, really, sets the scene.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, like you said, I think Evie is it brings in these two different aspects of Evie, the kind of like the absolutely full of energy and life and fun, but she's also quite introspective and a reader, and she loves playing with words, like you said. So let's have a look. So I'd love to be read like a book. I'd be something experimental and French, tricksy and clever, something that never uses the letter M or full stops. Or maybe something northern and gritty, something set in a bicycle factory with lots of moral ambiguity and A-line skirts. And what about everyone else? What sort of book would they be? Arthur would be the Wisden Almanac, of course, or maybe a history book or biography. Mrs. Scott Pym strikes me as a world's classic, probably with a leather cover. Margaret would definitely be an encyclopedia, full set. And Mrs. Swithenbank would be something hefty but no nonsense, like a dictionary. Vera already is a living, breathing book of bingo cards. And Christine, what would she be? Gothic horror.
Excellent. Thank you. And Christine being the wicked stepmother we were referring to earlier. So if you're a historian and you sort of accidentally fell into teaching computer science, where did this book come from?
Well, it's my first book, and it's kind of like genuinely my first book. It's the first book that I sat down and wrote. And I think anybody's first book just comes from every part of their life, you know, every second that they've ever lived. And I must have had a lot of stuff just being stored there. Because I mean, my literature was my first degree at university. Then I went off and lived in Italy, and I lived in Spain, and then I came back and taught at university here in Britain, and did various things, and then went into design history and worked in a museum. And while all of this stuff was going on, in the back of my mind, there was always part of me who said, "You've always wanted to write a novel. When are you going to write a novel?" And I kind of hit a big birthday and had a midlife crisis and thought, right, this is now or never, I'm going to do it. So I went and joined the Faber Academy Write a Novel course. And it was brilliant, actually, because it forced me to write a novel. I think I'm quite lazy and easily distracted. And writing a novel is really hard because it's really easy to start, but then just to carry on with momentum is very hard. And being part of a structured course gives you that momentum. And you're also writing for readers as well. If you're just sat by yourself writing in the attic, nobody might end up reading it, and you kind of know that. Whereas when you write something and you know that a group of 14 people are going to dissect it and talk about it, it makes you write as well as you possibly can, and also makes you keep writing. So I think I can like dragged everything into this book, Evie. I mean, I grew up in Yorkshire. I grew up sort of in the countryside. And I think actually the beginning of the book, Evie is in a car. She's taken her dad's car, dad's MG, and she's driving through the country lanes. And that is based on a real story about my mum. My mum grew up on a farm and was very naughty, and did indeed nick her dad's car and go driving off around the country lanes in the, I don't know, the 50s or something like that. And I just always had that in my mind as a nice image, and it also, I think, tells you something about a person. And I thought, that's a nice place to start a book. And the book, I sat down and started writing the first line, and it's the first chapter is practically exactly the same as I wrote it. I can remember in January 2016 sitting down and starting to write it, and having my mum, that story about my mum in my head. And then by the time I'd done, I don't know, a couple of paragraphs, Evie just took over, and luckily Evie's voice was there, so she told me what to put after that. Yeah.
So do you have a 16-and-a-half-year-old girl in your life?
No, I don't. No, people ask me this. Yeah, if I've got any daughters or sisters, or I absolutely don't at all. I think because people often ask me, well, how did you, middle-aged man, how did you manage to get this voice of a 16-and-a-half-year-old girl? And it's, I think the girl thing was kind of, I don't know how that happened, but the 16-and-a-half, I think we've all got a 16-and-a-half-year-old in us at some point. And I don't think, particularly back in the 60s, or even when I was 16, the difference between a boy and a girl wasn't huge. I think we had the same fears and the same hopes, and the same confusion and all of that. So I just tried to dig back. Like, for example, the posters on the wall. Evie's got 2 posters on the wall. She's obsessed with Adam Faith, who was this 1950s singer, late 50s singer. And she's got these 2 posters on the wall, Sophisticated Adam and Brooding Adam, and she talks to them. And I can really clearly remember having pop star posters on my wall. And I didn't actually talk to them, I don't think, but I can just remember that obsession that you have when you're young, when you're a teenager. And so that's what I wanted to bring into the book, that energy, and as well as all the confusion and everything else about growing up.
I think that it was a really good call, because if you do start spending time with 16-year-old girls, then you can be very quickly distracted. They're complex. But actually, if you just focus on the fact that she's human, and actually she's got a human story, and really her big story is, as you said at the beginning, it's coming of age, and she can sense, she knows that she's meant to do something more than, I couldn't remember the name of the program. What is that program that was on Sunday nights set in Yorkshire?
Last of the Summer Wine?
Last of the Summer Wine. You've got a lot of characters in your book that are straight out of Last of the Summer Wine. You can just picture them sitting on the benches, just looking out and being bored. She knows that there's more for her than that, but because she hasn't had a glimpse of what the options are, she can't put her finger on them. And then a lot of the book, she's saying, who am I going to be? It's like she knows she's got a multiple choice test, but she can't see all the options.
Yeah, I think nowadays 16-year-olds and young people in general are far savvier than perhaps we were, and definitely back when you were 16, when Evie was 16 in the 1960s. And like you said, she knows that there's something else out there, but she's got no idea what else. And it's almost like you've got this infinite sort of galaxy, universe of potential things that you can do, but there's just too much. You just don't know. It's like when you go to Sainsbury's and in a huge supermarket and there's 53 different types of olive oil. You're like, oh my God, which one shall I get? Just give me one. And it's that I think that's there in Evie as well. I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this. But actually, what I don't really know what it is what I want to do. I imagine I think there are sort of two types of people in life. There are those people who absolutely know exactly what they want to do and really go for it and throw everything into it. And then there's the rest of us, this is definitely me, who know really clearly what they don't want to do, but have absolutely no idea at all what they do want to do. And Evie is one of those people, I think, and I am, and I think a lot of us are as well.
So before we were recording, you told us that you are writing another book. Is this another decade book?
It is, yeah. So this one is set in 1972. So it's a follow-up to Evie, and it's following Evie's life after the miseducation. Yeah. So I'm currently writing it, doing lots of research. Well, at the moment, all my research is online, which is really unfortunate because for me, a great joy of writing Evie was going to the National Art Library at the V&A, where they hold practically every magazine ever published. And I love going through old magazines, and it's just the best research there ever is, because by just going through and having a look at old Vogues and Country House and Woman's Weekly from 1962, the story, the journalism is absolutely not the important thing. Who cares about that? The best bit is just looking at like the adverts and the fashion shoots and the readers' letters and like all of those things, because you get a really good idea of what people thought, what their aspirations were, what they wanted to buy, what they wanted to wear, what they wanted to listen to, what films they wanted to see. And it's just the best thing for going back and really positioning yourself in 1972. So I'm trying in 1962, whereas now I'm doing 1972, but it's all online. So I miss all that going through and flicking through the pages and just the sort of serendipity of finding things that you're not expecting to find.
Well, it sounds really exciting. When will we be able to look forward to that?
Well, the terrifying thing is it's actually, you can pre-order it now, and I think it's May 2022. And I say this is absolutely terrifying.
That's really
soon. Because the first book took me about 3 years to write, and there's no pressure or anything, because I didn't have an agent or a publisher, and I wrote it for fun, really. I really genuinely enjoyed writing the book. And then suddenly now, kind of like I'm near the end now. I've got about another 6 or 7 chapters to go, but just seeing online that you can pre-order a book that I haven't finished writing is absolutely terrifying. Because at the moment everything's about the paperback. So I'm suddenly, it comes out next week, and when that happens, it's going to be very busy, and I'll be going around visiting lots of bookshops. Hopefully I'll come and say hello to you as well in Wyndham. And I love that. I absolutely love going around and talking to booksellers. It's brilliant, but it just means that I'm not going to be able to get much writing done. So I know that there's going to be a pause for maybe 6 to 8 weeks of the writing, and then I'll really feel the pressure.
Well, you may feel the pressure, but it will be to our benefit, because I'm looking forward to being able to recommend this as a summer read. I never really understood what people mean by a summer read, but actually I think this has helped define it for me, because it's not too demanding. It's got enough of a story that it keeps your attention. You want to pick it up again to see what happens next. It's got a happy ending. So it's a bit of a break from the hard realities of a lot of books.
Yeah, over lockdown last year, it came out in July 2020, and I'd never really been on social media, Twitter or Instagram or anything like that, but I was told I have to go on, you have to do that, and I did, and it was actually a very nice experience. And one of the very nice experiences were people direct messaging me, DMing me, and I've had such really touching DMs from people saying how they've been affected by lockdown and COVID, and how the book had helped them get through it. I had one, and it was just absolutely in tears, because somebody had lost someone very close to them through COVID. And she said, reading Evie gave me a chance to smile again. And I just read that and absolutely was in shreds of tears for about 10 minutes after. And it's just nobody can ever say anything nicer than that ever again. It's just such a lovely thing. And yeah, so I think hopefully the book did help people through last lockdown in its only tiny little way. maybe it'll help them get through this summer as well.
Excellent. Well, we really do enjoy it. And thank you for writing it and the one that's coming up. Now, you sent us quite a list of books that you would recommend that people read between them. Do you want to tell us about any of the books that you would recommend for people to read who have enjoyed The Miseducation of Evie
Let's have a look.
Epworth?
Just pull my list
And,
up. Yeah, there we go. Well, I mean, it's just a list of things that I've read that I enjoyed. I mean, the first one I've mentioned already, Kate Atkinson, and she's up there. She's like my writing god. I just think she's wonderful because she's really clever and she's a fantastic writer, but she's eminently readable. I mean, you don't feel, when you get to the end of a Kate Atkinson book, you've absolutely enjoyed it. You've laughed, you've thought, you've been impressed by the beauty of the prose, but you don't feel like you deserve a badge at the end of it for, I made it through to the end, because it's just been a pleasure to do. And I think a writer who can do that, who is clever and experimental and very readable, I think I've said this in a few interviews, actually. If she were a man, she'd be, like Sir Kate Atkinson, great literary person, Nobel Prize or something, I think. I think her books, not now because people realize she's such a great writer, but I think because she writes often about sort of women and domestic books, people don't take them seriously. They're like, oh, the book made me laugh, so it can't be a proper book. It can't be like serious literature, capital S, capital L. And she is, show me a really, really good writer who can also make me smile and laugh, and they are the ones who deserve the Nobel Prize, And so I just think I can't say how much I love her.
It really does achieve a human connection on top of writing a really good story, on top of being really, really clever. So, which you've put behind the scenes at the museum here, which is the one lots of people talk about.
I just think any of them, even, the Jackson Brodie books, which are her detective stories. And, I did so like I said, my first degree was literature. So there's a little element in the back of me, like a sort of a snobbish literature student element. It's like, I've never read any sort of detective stories. And I think probably Kate Atkinson's Jackson Brodie was my first proper detective book. And I loved it. I thought, my God, this is absolutely brilliant. Case histories. And then through that, I all that ridiculous, stupid, pretentious, idiot literature student in my head, we were going like, no, we don't read thrillers. I've enjoyed so many thrillers and detective stories, and they're wonderfully written. And it's all thanks to Kate Atkinson. Those Jackson Brodie books are brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Anybody else you'd recommend that your readers should look at?
Yeah, there's a book which I absolutely love called The Diary of a Provincial Lady, and it's by E.M. Delafield, and it's written in the 1930s. And I first read this probably about 20 years ago, around about the time that I was living in Norwich. And for years I'd heard this weird title, The Diary of a Provincial Lady. And again, I thought, God, well, I can't think of a more boring book. What a tedious, boring book, what a horrible. And I'd see sort of photos of the cover and it'd be all kind of like chintzy. And I just think, oh God, who buys that? And I think it must have been on Radio 4 Book at Bedtime. And I didn't know what it was. I was just probably getting ready for bed and I heard this book on Radio 4 Book at Bedtime. And I just stopped. I couldn't do anything because I was just listening and laughing and thinking, my God, this is fantastic. What is it? And then at the end of it, they said, that concludes today's episode of The Diary of a Provincial Lady. And I thought, my God, I can't believe it. So I went straight to Waterstones, probably the one in Norwich, and bought it and just devoured it. And it is very, very, very funny. And a wonderful, she's got a very good eye for sort of, again, daily life in the 1930s. And I love the 1930s, so a decade I'm really interested in with the history that I do, my kind of other job. And you get to learn a lot about society. It's not sort of like a broad sweep of society, but a very specific part of society. And she does it very well. And it's very, very funny. And so just don't be put off by the title or the cover, because it's a brilliant book. And again, I think for me, it's up there with Three Men in a Boat or Diary of Nobody. it should be a comedy classic, but it's, you know, it's written by a woman and it's about a woman in a home in the 1930s. So it's kind of like, oh, you know, it's not in the canon, and it's ridiculous because it should be in the canon. It's just as good as Three Men in a Boat, easily. Yeah.
That's a really strong recommendation. I'm going to have to look it up myself.
Honestly, I don't know anybody who hasn't read it who hasn't absolutely loved it. Yeah. Unless you don't like funny books, because it is a funny book, yeah.
Well, especially it's useful for me because we have some customers who are quite a lot older than I am, and they ask for something funny, and they don't necessarily think what's funny now is what they're looking for. And I have been specifically asked something that is funny, like 3 Men in a Boat. And fortunately, I have their peers to ask what they have also enjoyed. So I work within the generation like that, but it's good to have another up my sleeve.
Well, they'll love E.M. Delafield, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of time, and there's quite a list here. Eleanor Oliphant, I think everybody was familiar with that, and she did something quite extraordinary with that, didn't she, Gail Honeyman? But your list here just covers so much time. You are clearly the historian and no respecter of recent releases, because you've got Alan Bennett's Diary, Stu Townsend, Adrian Mole, Woodhouse is here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, he has to be. Yeah, you know, and the same with Nancy Mitford as well. I love Nancy Mitford as well, and Stella Gibbons, Cold Comfort Farm. That's a very funny book, I think. Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because that's the really strong vibe I got from Evie. It was a line between Cold Comfort Farm, Woodhouse, and Adrian Mole. And I think that's what's so lovely about it, is that I remember that joy of reading Adrian Mole when I was in my early teens.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like giving yourself permission to rediscover that kind of book again with Evie, which is... So I think anybody, it kind of goes the other way, doesn't it? If you're in need of Adrian Mole right now, you can find Evie in the interim.
Yeah, and well, because I recently, well, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, reread Adrian Mole, actually, because I'm the same as you. I can remember it was given to me by a friend, by the sister of a friend when I was at school. And I'd been a massive reader up until the age of being 12, 13. And then I discovered computer video games and going out and doing stuff. And my reading just dropped off. And this friend's sister gave me this book. And through that, I rediscovered the love of reading again. And it's just brilliant, yeah. But even the kind of the later ones, which were, you know, like the Cappuccino years and the Prostate years, all of those. I mean, she really is so clever, such a massive loss to the country when Sue Townsend died, because she's not only, again, very funny, but she absolutely nails what Britain was like at the time. It's incredible. You know, they'll be studied for hundreds of years, those books. Yeah, I love them.
Quite right.
Well, it's been really good talking to you this lunchtime, and all the better knowing that we are likely to be able to see you in a few weeks' time, when you might be able to stop by one Saturday. Definitely. So we'll have that date, and once we confirm all of that up on the when we post this, so people can know that we've firmed that up. And we've got the yellow version of the book on its way.
So, the very rare one, yeah. In years to come, they'll be on Antiques Roadshow, I'm sure.
Or in our own decade. There we go.
Hopefully, yeah.
20s.
Well, thank you again for the conversation. It's been really good hearing about the book and getting to know you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your support as well at Kett's Books. Thank you.
Thank you.